fashion, I'd like to introduce to you Rolf Balma, who is part of our study committee that is dealing with same-sex marriage, and he will introduce the listening session that we are going to proceed with now.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Rolf Balma, and I am the chair of the Committee to Provide Pastoral Guidance for Same-Sex Marriage. In starting, let me just say that we appreciate deeply Synod's willingness to use an hour of its time for this listening session. We are not reporting until next year's Synod, but we were encouraged when we were mandated by Synod 2013 to follow the shepherding model, which means to engage the church in various ways in conversation as we were doing our work. These listening sessions that we have done are part of that engagement, which will help us in producing our report that will be ready, we hope, by this fall. I am not the only member of the committee who is here. There are actually 4 members of the committee who are here at Synod. I'd like to introduce the other 3 who are here as well. Dr. John Rotman, who is one of the advisors from the seminary. John, I think, is John? Oh, he's standing up over there. John is professor of homiletics at Calvin Theological Seminary. Reverend Dave Rogie from Classis Eastern Canada is also here. He spoke to Synod earlier this week, and he is on the committee as well. And then Ryan Strike, who is in the audience. Ryan is a journalist with the Associated Press. He just finished a 6-month stint covering Idaho politics. Unless you think that isn't much of an assignment, any state with a governor named Butch Otter is going to have interesting politics. So Ryan is actually on his way back to Washington, D.C., where he'll be taking up another assignment, and he was able to join us here at Synod, and we're glad that he's able to be with us. Time is precious, and we need to do a little bit of rearranging. The problem with the way you're seated right now is that the conversation is going to be with members of your own classes. While that might be helpful, it would be even more helpful to get a sense of the diversity and experiences of the church if we have an opportunity to mix up. So we've applied mathematical analysis to this, and if we do it quickly, we should be able to shift so that virtually all of you will be in a group of 4 with people from 3 different classes. So follow carefully. I believe Bruce this morning told you that you were smart and you were humble, and we are going to put that to the test right now. So do not move until you are told to move, but when you are told to move, please do so quickly and accurately. All right. Everybody on this side of a table, okay? So if you're on this side of a table, you are to move 3 seats away from the platform. And that means that if you are in the last 3 seats, towards the end of the table, you are to come up to the head of the table. People on that side of the table, would you be able to please move right now and take your laptops along with you? Okay. We are only halfway done with the move. You people on this side of the table, we have an easier task for you. You have to move 1 seat this direction towards the platform. And if you are the first person in the table closest to the platform, move all the way to the other end. Please do so. All right. I'm glad to hear introductions being given. The laws of mathematics tell us that you now should be sitting in a delegational foursome with no one from your classes. And if the laws of mathematics did not work, don't tell us, all right? We're going to move on. In the lead up to this listening session, I need to do a few things by way of introduction. Synod 2013 gave a mandate to our committee that in its most condensed form is this: to give guidance and clarification on how members, clergy, and churches can apply the biblical teachings reflected in the Acts of Synod 1973 report, and see also the report to Synod 2002, in light of the legality of same-sex marriage in certain jurisdictions, as well as how to communicate these teachings in a truthful and gracious way within North America. Just a few comments about the mandate. First of all, the mandate asked the committee to accept as given, as a starting point, that the biblical theological perspective of the 1973 report on homosexuality, which distinguishes between orientation and behavior, that same-sex orientation is not of itself sinful, and secondly, that same-sex sexual behavior is sinful. Now note, and this is really important, the committee's mandate is not to address homosexuality, but to address the cultural and legal aspects of same-sex marriage as they impact the church and its ministry. I'm going to be saying this again. Our conversation today is not about homosexuality. There is a lot of anxiety in the church when conversations about homosexuality take place. This is to be a conversation in which there is an open and frank conversation about a legal and cultural change within our societies that ends up impacting ministry. And it's about same-sex marriage, which is not the same as homosexuality. And so, I will say this again in a few minutes. In your conversations, and this is the challenge that we've had in many of our listening sessions, if the conversation is moving around to discussing homosexuality, pull it back to same-sex marriage, because that is the topic that the committee has been charged with. Now, as I said, the committee was instructed to follow a shepherding model, carrying out its work, and what that does is engages the church in conversation while we are doing our work. It starts the conversation in the churches before a report is issued. Now, we're to address cultural and legal changes. I need to do just a touch on the legal background to this conversation. I get to reveal to you that an important Supreme Court decision was issued recently. No, it's not on the Affordable Care Act, and no, it was not the same-sex marriage decision that we are anticipating here in the United States. This actually was the Supreme Court of Iowa, and what they just ruled is that the Iowa Supreme Court has affirmed the right to be drunk on your front porch. And this is not a joke. These were actual headlines in the Des Moines Register. And in the state of Iowa, you cannot be convicted of public intoxication while standing on your front porch. The Iowa Supreme Court issued that decision on Friday afternoon, and how it impacts Synod is that tonight's Canadian Bible study will be held on the front porch. Listening sessions are practical. All right. A little bit of legal background. In Canada, the move from no legal same-sex marriage to legal same-sex marriage happened very quickly. It happened in 2 years. It was done by Parliamentary Act in 2005. And so in Canada, in 2001, there would have been no jurisdictions in which same-sex marriage was legal. By 2005, it was legal in all jurisdictions. So our Canadian churches, our Canadian brothers and sisters, our Canadian pastors have been ministering in an environment in which same-sex marriage has been legal for a decade already. Here in the United States, it's a much more complex situation. These 4 maps highlight the pace of change. In 2010, you'll notice that most of the map is orange, either deep or light orange. Those are states in which there are constitutional bans on same-sex marriage. It's incorporated in the state constitution that there cannot be same-sex marriage. In 2013, when this committee was organized, when Synod mandated this committee, it was a situation where 19 states, almost all of them in the Northeast, allowed same-sex marriage. But still, most of the country had constitutional bans against it. These were state constitutional bans. As of today, June 2015, that map in the lower left corner, 36 states and the District of Columbia allow same-sex marriage, almost all of them by court order. And currently, there is a case before this U.S. Supreme Court. It's from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Michigan and Kentucky and Tennessee and Ohio. And the Supreme Court is likely to rule on that by the end of the month. And most predictions, probably 90 to 95% of predictions, are that the Supreme Court will find an equal protection right to civil same-sex marriage in the United States. Now, one of the things that comes up in this conversation is that there is a distinction. It's been a growing distinction over the years between civil and religious marriage. George Mavrodes, who is a retired philosophy professor at the University of Michigan and a member of the Ann Arbor Christian Reformed Church, has talked about the fact that we have equivocation going on here. We talk marriage, but there are 2 definitions of marriage that are operating. We have civil marriage and we have religious marriage, and he actually says, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that we ought to change the names of one of them, at least, in order to keep them distinct. And so I sort of came up with something that maybe we should call civil marriage civerage and religious marriage relimerage, and that we can keep these 2 things distinct. Because on the one hand, civil marriage establishes a set of legal rights and privileges and responsibilities. A survey of the U.S. Code showed over 1,000 laws in which application of that law was dependent on marital status. It establishes legal status for inheritance, for medical decision-making, for kinship and parental status. And this is a very interesting and key point. Over the last 15 years, the law in both the U.S. and Canada has progressively disengaged from establishing legal rules with respect to sexual relationships. In 1940, it was illegal to commit adultery. It was illegal to have sex outside of marriage. And there were all sorts of forms of sexual expression which were criminalized. And over those last 50 to 60 years, the government has progressively moved away sometimes by statutes being changed, and in many cases by courts saying the government has no business there. And yet, on the other hand, we have religious marriage, which is not concerned about the inheritance and all those sorts of rules, but instead is worried about this covenantal relationship between a man and woman and God and the covenant community, and then uses marriage to demarcate appropriate and inappropriate sexual relations. And I would highly recommend the article that's listed at the bottom here. It appeared in Christianity Today Online. It's by a legal scholar at Washington University of St. Louis by the name of John Inazu. What to expect after the Supreme Court's marriage decision. But it's a really helpful discussion of 4 aspects of the decision that help Christians think through what about a society where we're finding that civil marriage and religious marriage are diverging. So now, we need to have the listening session. Let me give you just a few instructions about this. First of all, this is about listening. It's not about making statements. It's not about proclaiming where you stand on something. This is about listening. It's about contributing in a conversation, and you're going to be having a discussion within groups of 4. And that means that if there's a general equality of listening going on, you should be talking about 1/3 of the amount that you're listening. Listen to what other people are saying about where ministry takes place and what's the experience in connection with same-sex marriage. Listen for their thoughts, their observations, and reflections. We would like you to appoint 1 person in each group of 4 to be a recorder and to open up a document and to keep the comments and the observations and the questions that occur, make a record of them. You will be asked at the end to email that to the committee's email address so that we have those and can go through those. There are going to be 3 questions. We will prompt you when it's time to go on to the next discussion question. And let me say again, I promised you I would. If the conversation veers to other topics, such as homosexuality, pull it back to same-sex marriage. Okay? Are you ready? Question number 1. Not long after becoming involved in the church's outreach ministry, in significant part due to their young children's participation in the church's children's programs, a same-sex couple asked the pastor if they might have their children baptized. The pastor communicates the request to the council. How should the council and the pastor respond to the request? We have given you some of the particulars of the situation. I'm sure that some of you, even as you read it now, are thinking, there are parts of this story that I'm missing that would be important as I decide what to do pastorally. We're not going to give you all the particulars, but please note in your conversation, if that does come up, how might certain particulars change how you might respond, okay? So anyway, discuss, and we'll let you discuss this for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, 2 more minutes on this question. Okay, I hate to call an end to the conversation on this one, but we need to move to the second question. All right, here's a slightly different situation. An elder has a grown child who's in a same-sex relationship. The elder approaches the pastor and asks if he or she would officiate at the same-sex wedding. The pastor has officiated at the wedding of the elder's other children. How should the pastor respond? Discuss. All right, we have one more question that we would like you to discuss. And this goes from being a sort of practical ministry question to being more of a conceptual, theological, ecclesiastical question. And it's a little more involved. I hope that the type is large enough for you to read. We're going to have to rely on the younger members of Synod to be able to decipher this. Okay. So here it is. The following are 4 views of the way in which the church and the state relate on the matter of marriage. Which of the following views should guide the church today in light of both our Reformed worldview and our current environment concerning same-sex marriage? You notice we complexified it there by giving you sort of 2 standards, Reformed worldview and current environment. There might be some tension there. These are the 4 views. Marriage is fundamentally a religious institution. The state should recognize the religious nature of marriage and only authorize marriage as understood by religious authority. Second view. Marriage as the covenantal union of a man and a woman is grounded both religiously and by proper recognition of the created order. The state, even if it attempts to be religiously neutral, makes a profound error when it ignores what nature itself teaches and authorizes civil same-sex marriage. Third view. Both the state, that is civil government, and the church have a direct interest in family structure and well-being. But these interests are not identical. Both the state and the church have latitude within limits to define marriage to pursue their legitimate interests, even though those interests may not be the same. The state and the church may end up with different definitions of marriage. And then view number 4, the church does not tell civil authority what to do. The church simply defines marriage as it finds itself compelled by Scripture and orders its internal life as Scripture and the gospel requires. What the state does is the state's business. Those are the 4 views. Try to parse through them and discuss amongst yourself which. All right? And if you want to add 5 or 6 because you think there's a better way to describe it, have at it. About 2 more minutes on this. Okay, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the engaged discussion that has been going on. And we are ready to move towards wrapping this up. There's still a couple things. Yes, a question.
Email address that we need to send it to back up on the screen.
It will be in just a minute. Okay.
That's okay.
You wanted to know whether the email address to send the comments to could be put back up. They will be in just a minute. They're also on the Synod announcements page. Here's what we need to do to wrap up, okay? Don't move until requested. We're going to ask you to return to your original seat with your class's delegation. And then for about 5 to 7 minutes with the delegates of your classes, we want you to share together any insights, questions, reflections, whatever you found to be most interesting about the discussion that you've just had. And then we're going to ask the reporters for each of the group if you could email the comments. Here again is the pastoral care-samesex@crcna.org. And really, any delegates, whether you're the reporter or not, if there is something that you would like to email to the committee, please feel free to send that, okay? So if at this point you would move back to your original seats and then take 5 to 7 minutes to talk about And if I could ask you for your attention one last time. We need to bring this listening session to a conclusion. We had promised the officers of Synod that we would conclude by 4:30, and we are right at that point. So let me just say thank you very much. One of the reasons that I was willing to serve on this committee and serve as the chair is out of the hope and conviction that the church could have a really good conversation about what was an important and pressing social cultural issue of our time and how the church addresses that. And the type of conversations that I heard going on were a manifestation of that. So thank you very much. Let me remind you that myself, John Rotman, Dave Rogie, and Ryan Strike will be around Synod for the next few days. Please feel free to engage us in conversation, and we appreciate very much your attention and your concern with the committee as we complete our work. Thank you.
And thank you, Rolf, for engaging us in that conversation, a conversation I'm sure that will be continuing as Synod goes on, but not only as Synod goes on, but a conversation I'm sure will be continuing when we go back home to our churches and to our communities as well. And Rolf, I hope that I can encourage all delegates of Synod when they bring these conversations home that they may continue to keep in prayer your committee as they bring to us next year their recommendations for us and how we engage our culture and our world with this very important issue that we face. Thank you so much. I'm going to do this a little bit early. Len Vanderzee, are you here? You are here. And then I'm going to ask Reverend Mao for Advisory Committee 5A to come forward. Reverend Mao from Committee 5A, and if you will introduce to us Advisory Committee 5A's report recommendation under C, recommendations, that you will introduce or that you will at least move for us C2, that Synod appoint Reverend Leonard J. Vanderzee as interim banner editor-in-chief effective September 1, 2015.
So simply that recommendation then.
Okay.
Okay. Recommendation C2 from Advisory Committee 5, it's 5A, that Synod appoint Reverend Leonard J. Vanderzee as interim banner editor-in-chief effective September 1, 2015. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and that is supported. I'm not going to ask for discussion on that right now, but I just thought that that'd be a way for us to introduce Leonard.
Sure.
And Leonard, sell us yourself. If I may just give a brief, Len has served the denomination in so many different ways, and Len, you've been a champion for the Christian Reformed Church. I know that. You've served us well, so you do come with good credentials. In fact, I remember joking with Len, I think it was yesterday, do you have a curriculum vitae? And he said, boy, you really want to know that. He wasn't sure if that was for him or against him. You remember that conversation? It was a different word. But anyway, Len, thank you for being with us, and just, talk to us.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really expect to sell myself, but I actually expected to respond to after whatever vote had been taken here, so I will just do that. You all know the old business adage that people tend to advance to the level of their incompetence. And I want you to pray with me that this is not it. I'm hoping that if you appoint me that, I'm actually hoping that my personal level of incompetence is retirement, which I've never really quite been able to wrap my head around at this point. If you appoint me, I'm happy and excited, but also I have to say I'm nervous about taking up that task for this coming year. I would be crazy, of course, to even think about this position if it wasn't for the fact that there was a very dedicated and experienced and competent staff that was already in place. And I'm sure you all recognize the vital place that the banner has within our denominational life. It is really one of the few communication factors that brings us together. And yet you also recognize how much more difficult that is becoming because our denomination is becoming much more diverse. It's becoming more diverse ethnically. It's becoming more diverse culturally. It's becoming more diverse theologically. So how does that get reflected in one paper that comes out once a month called the Banner? All I can say at this point is that if you approve this nomination, that I will do my very best, with God's help, to shepherd the Banner through this year of transition, and at the same time to try to continue to improve its tone and its voice and its inclusiveness. And I will do so with a full commitment and full agreement with the guidelines that you're about to look at in a little bit also that are laid down by the Board of Trustees. So I would appreciate your support. I would appreciate your prayers, and I would also appreciate your charitable criticism. I've never been in a position before where I've been an editor before, but I've never been in a position before where I get letters to the editor, and Bob tells me that there are lots of them. But that charitable criticism is important in doing that job. So hopefully I will be able to come back next year and welcome, along with Synod, the new editor of the Banner. And then I'll get around to the idea of finding out my competence in regard to retirement. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Len. Go ahead. I think we'll entertain that motion now and ask for any discussion with regards to it.
Okay.
I don't think everyone knows where this is found. I announced it as Advisory Committee 5A, Recommendations C, number 2. Discussion. Do we need to refresh the computer? Is it up there? Okay. Is there any discussion, any questions? I thought I saw some hands. Cue yourself. If I see no hands, I think we're ready to vote. Or no hands, but no one's on the queue. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. It's carried. Then let's move back to C1. C1. That's you, Dan. Yeah, we're going to stick with your report just for a little while. And what I'm going to do, people, is okay. I'm going to dismiss you early this evening.
Yes. All right, C1. You just got this in the last couple of hours, so I'll read it. That Synod recognized the significant contributions of Reverend Robert Demore, Banner Editor-in-Chief, to the denominational magazine, thank him for his years of service, and permit time in Synod's schedule to hear from him. The advisory committee also added this part. Furthermore, that Synod acknowledged with gratitude to God Reverend Demore's deep love for the Christian Reformed Church, his willingness to address difficult issues with biblical insight and pastoral sensitivity, and his warm sense of humor. During his tenure as editor, Dr. Demore led the implementation of the Every Household Banner and created accessibility to the banner online. Synod thanks him for his energetic leadership for more than a decade of faithful service as banner editor. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
And that has been supported. You'll be able to hear here, I think it's tomorrow that we have him scheduled to speak to us, so.
Yeah.
Any discussion on that motion? Oh, yeah, we just gave him an honorary doctorate as well. Any more discussion? All in favor of recommendation 1C1, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. You know what, let's stop there. I'm going to ask for Adriana Siebinga to come forward to lead us in our concluding prayer. We will reconvene tonight at 7 o'clock, I think it is. We have 2 interviews that we will be conducting, and at that time also our Vice President will be chairing the meeting at that time. I do have, yes, that one announcement to make, that Committee 2 will need to meet together over dinner in the West Commons. Committee 2 will need to meet together over dinner in the West Commons. Are there any other committees that need to give indication of needing to meet? Oh, thank you. Thank you. By the way, ask your partner that's sitting next to you. I don't care if you look north or look south. I'm not even sure if I'm saying the right directions, but make sure your hair is looking good, because where are we going to meet for this? We are going to meet right next to the campus center over there. So when we have our prayer concluded, we will need to meet next to the campus center over there for the group photograph, and that's where we will meet for the group photograph. It won't take that long, and then we will reconvene tonight at 7 o'clock. Adriana, would you lead us now in closing prayer? Let's rise as we do so. Yes? Photograph is now. Photograph is immediately following our closing prayer over there.
Let's pray. Creator God, we come to you at the end of this session, and we thank you for knowing that you are with us in spirit, and knowing that you have given us compassion and gifts. And we thank you for the different committees that bring recommendations to us, for their hard work. Lord, you know that some of the things that we discussed this afternoon were difficult, and for some very painful. And I just pray for your blessing on the work of this committee, that they may continue to do their work well. We thank you that we had people serving the banner for Reverend DeMoore. And we also thank you that Reverend Len Banerjee has agreed to be interim editor. Lord, you have gifted us with much, and we give you praise. We ask for your continued blessing as we continue to meet, and we just bless your name. Amen.
Amen. Caleb Dixon, where are you? Will you close in prayer after our evening session? You were supposed to have closed in prayer at this session, but I just didn't see it right. So in the evening session, you will close in prayer for us, okay? I did. I announced that already.